Many of you might have created procedural geometry or many other objects within Blender and might need to export it as a different format, maybe an OBJ, an STL, FBX, or glTF. However, when you go to export it, you either face errors or you see completely different objects being exported that look nothing like the object that you have within Blender. In today's video, we're going to figure out exactly why that happens while focusing on mainly the glTF format, although the same principles do work for all of these other formats as well. So we will learn exactly why we use the glTF format, what it is, everything about it, and also focus on how to mitigate all of the exporting issues that you might face with the mesh as well as the texture. So it's going to be packed with really useful information. So even if you don't plan on exporting as a glTF yet, definitely watch this video to the end because you might just start exporting in these formats after watching it. So with that, let's go ahead and actually begin understanding what the glTF format is. The glTF is made up of two parts, the GL and the TF. GL comes from OpenGL, which used to be the backend for Blender, but has now been changed to Vulkan, and that is for another video altogether. And this GL stands for Graphics Library. The TF stands for Transmission Format. So from its name itself, it's pretty easy to understand that the glTF format was made for easy transferability over the internet. So it has to be extremely fast and lightweight. This made it the gold standard for interactive web elements, the ones that allow you to just rotate around and move things around on the web page itself, and also things like game assets, as well as things like VR and AR, where you would require these objects to be rendered in real time without any lag. So if you ever are developing anything or making assets for a client that needs it for these purposes, it's best if you give it to them in a glTF format. However, glTF had a few issues because it stores the mesh data as one file, then it stores all of the textures in a different file, and all of the dependencies between the texture and the mesh in another file, and so on and so forth. So it would have all of these different files that would have to be present in the same folder, or at least in the correct locations, to finally generate the object without any errors. But this required a lot of dependencies and was very prone to errors. So instead of the glTF, they devised a new format, which is the GLB. And the .glb stands for binary, and it's essentially the exact same as the glTF, except it stores all of the mesh data as well as the image data or the texture data and all of those within the same file. So you don't have any dependency issues and everything is stored in one single file. So that makes it a lot more robust and even faster to load, especially when you're talking about web applications or other such use cases. So that's why mostly nowadays you go with GLB, and that's actually all there is to know about these. If you do want information about other formats like the OBJ, the STL, or the FBX, let me know and maybe I'll make videos on each of these in the near future and have even deeper dives to explain everything behind why they exist and how they operate. But before that, let's go ahead and find out what all of this means for exporting our objects. Because these are lightweight and fast, it can't actually sit and evaluate procedural geometry on the fly. That means that the actual file that it's storing, as we stated, it has one single file for just the mesh. That means it needs real mesh data. It needs to store every single point, where it is, and what it's connected to. If you actually take a look at this geometry node modifier, it doesn't actually have that data. You can change the data at any point of time, so it just shows the relationship between these different objects and points. So that is exactly why you can't really export it. The actual mesh data that's stored in these objects is what it was before this geometry node modifier. So if I was to just select this and go into edit mode, you see it has a cube because the cube is the original geometry. And if I was to just export this arrow right now, the cube is what would actually get exported in the GLB file. The same would happen for the FBX and OBJ as well. So the easiest way to convert this into real mesh data is to apply the modifier. But if you were to go ahead and try and apply this modifier, you'll realize that something weird happens. And that's because when you're applying a modifier, you're only applying the real mesh data that's formed within the modifier into actual mesh data for the rest of the scene. However, these arrows were not real mesh data. They were instances. Similarly, if you had something like a curve, that would also not be applied or converted into a real curve when you apply this modifier, because that's not real mesh data. So if you were to ever apply any geometry node modifier that you get from any place, for example, you download this generator from Gumroad, or maybe you have a procedural city generator and you just want to convert it into real mesh, directly applying it will not work. So what you have to do is open up the actual geometry node tree, and you can do that by going into the geometry node editor. And if there are any curves, you would have to search for a curve to mesh and plug that in and choose an appropriate profile curve as well. But in my case, I do not have any curves, so I will not do that. Instead, because I do have instances, just before the group output, I'm going to press Shift A and search for a realize instances node and plug that in just before the group output. And that way, it takes all of the instance data and converts it into real geometry. Because instances is just a pointer to some actual geometry and says sample that while rendering out these sections. But now once you realize it, it actually converts it to real mesh data. So now if I was to go ahead and apply it, you see we get the actual geometry. So now this I can go ahead and actually export as a glTF or a GLB, and I would get the actual arrow. However, something that's very important is to remember that if you're realizing instances, the textures might change. So the first thing is, in many of my tutorials, you've seen that we store something called a named attribute, and we could store these named attributes for different instances so that you have one value for an individual instance, so that you could get different colors for entire objects. Maybe if you're creating something like this animation over here. But if you realize the instances, these named attributes will not work anymore in your shader editor, because in the shader editor, you would choose instancer over here and you no longer have instance geometry. It's all real geometry. So be careful about that. There are different ways of keeping those values, but you have to be aware of that. But even then, there's a bigger problem, which is what type of materials and textures is actually supported by OBJ, GLTF, and FBX formats. In general, they actually support only the principled BSDF. They can accept a base color, they can accept a metallic value, a roughness value, and a few of the other basic ones. For example, some of them, like GLTF, does support emission, but it doesn't look the exact same. Things like subsurface and specular are not supported, so you have to know which of these are actually supported and which of them aren't. So the final look is going to look different from what you see in Blender. Apart from that, if these are single values, it's great, it's supported. But if you were to go ahead and search for something like a noise texture and try and plug that into the base color, this will no longer be accepted by a GLTF format. Same would go for an OBJ. No procedural textures can be accepted. Instead, what is accepted by GLTFs is PBR textures, which is where you have an image texture that goes into the base color and you have a different image texture for each scenario, one for the metallicness, maybe one for the roughness, and so on and so forth. You get textures like this when you download textures from places like Polyhaven, or you could always create your own, but this would be supported when exporting to a glTF. However, what if you don't want this and you actually just wanted a noise texture? In situations like that, you would actually have to bake in whatever procedural texture you've created. And sadly, you cannot bake textures in Eevee, but you can in cycles. So let's take an example of that. Let's suppose you just have an object with some very complex texture added into it. In my situation, I'm just using a noise texture, but imagine this is a very complex procedural texture. You have to ensure that you get the lighting and everything set up exactly as you want before you go ahead and bake the texture. Also, you would have to unwrap your UVs, and for all primitive shapes, the UVs are already unwrapped. But suppose you had your own custom shape. Maybe you had something like this. The first thing that you would have to do is unwrap it. So press tab to go into edit mode, tap A to select everything, and then tap U to unwrap. Now you can choose different UV unwrapping methods. You could use add-ons to do this as well. But for most situations, Smart UV Project works just as well, or else a cube or cylinder projection based off of what shape you have. So I'm going to go with the Smart UV Project and click unwrap. So once I have this unwrapped, you can actually see the UV map by creating a new window, switching this to the UV editor, and you can see this is how my unwrapped texture looks. Now to actually bake this in, what you do is in the material, you press Shift A and search for an image texture. You just plug that in and you press new to create a new texture. And I'm just going to call this bake texture. and you can adjust this width and height to your liking, and I'll talk about this in the optimization section. But for now, let's click new image. And once you've done that, make sure you switch your render properties from EV to cycles, and then down at the bottom, you'll see you have an option for baking. With this object selected and the bake texture created within the material and the UVs unwrapped, go to bake and click bake, and ensure that you have the actual image texture selected. Since you want to bake into this image texture, have this selected and then click bake. And in fact, you could create one for the base color, one for metallic. Let's suppose you had a different texture like the Voronoi texture set in for the roughness. You could have a different image texture. So let's just create another image texture, and this time I'll call it roughness map, and then click new image. And then for the bake texture, I could again just choose the diffuse or the combined, doesn't really matter. And for the roughness, I could go ahead and just choose only the roughness and then bake it in. But right now, I'm just going to show you what happens when you bake in the combined version. So click combined and click bake. It'll take some time to evaluate every pixel and essentially paint on what the value is over here onto the pixel for this image, which is going to be mapped in this UV texture over here. And remember, you have to get your lighting and everything correct, because even the shadows and the dark sides, all of that will be taken into account. So now that it's baked in, you can see how the shadow has also come in. You have all the dark sides and everything. So if I was to now just remove this noise texture and plug in the baked texture that we just created, you can see you get the exact same thing. Of course, this does look a little different because this is already dark and the shadow's coming in again. So it's like it's becoming twice as dark. But if I was to just select my light and grab it and move it underneath, you can see how even the shadow was baked into the actual texture itself. So that is exactly how these baked images work. And you could do one for the base color, one for the roughness, one for metallicness, and so on and so forth. But once you've baked all of these in, you can then go ahead and export as the GLB format. So I think that's it for all of the textures. But in general, I would like to talk about a few more optimizations that you would genuinely benefit from if you're trying to export for games, webs, or any real-time application like VR and AR. The first thing is make sure you apply at least the scale. Ideally, I would apply all transforms, but make sure that you apply at least the scale. In many situations, I've seen that you have it scaled up or scaled down and you think it looks absolutely perfect, but when you actually export it, the entire scaling goes completely haywire. So ensure that if you have a mesh, you press Shift A and you click Apply Scale. Apart from that, it's always best to try and have no redundant geometry or just unnecessary geometry if it's not required. Because right now, this is a very simple shape with only a few vertices, so this might not slow down anything as much. However, if you were to have a slightly more complex mesh, which will happen as you start modeling, all of these start adding up very, very fast. So you see, none of these faces were actually needed. This could have just been one single face. So a really fast way to fix all of this redundant excess geometry is using a decimate modifier. That just helps make it much more low poly. So again, in your modifier tabs, you can go ahead and search for a decimate and then just change it to planar and go ahead and apply it. So now if I go back into my edit mode, you can see that I have only a single face here, which works quite well. Another thing is that a few formats would not like any of these n-gons, and in fact, forget about an n-gon, they don't even like quads as well. So for the formats that don't like quads, it's safest to go over and search for a triangulate modifier and then just apply this. So that way, when you actually apply it, you see it's not going to be made out of quads, but it's going to be made out of triangles only. So this just divides the mesh into nice little triangles, which helps export to many other formats as well. So once you have the least amount of geometry necessary and all of them as quads, the last optimization technique would be to ensure that the actual textures that you create are as small as possible. So whenever you create a new texture, you always have the option to select the width and the height. Essentially, if you're creating something that's going to be very close up and you need the detail, you can increase this as much as necessary. But if you're creating something that's there in the background, you generally don't need that much of detail. So keep this as low as possible, because the larger this is, the more memory it's going to take, the larger your files are going to be, the slower it's going to be to load on websites, and your game is going to lag as well. So keep this as low as possible, just enough to make it work. And that should be it for optimizing everything. Remember, the GLB actually accepts quite a lot of these. The OBJ is the oldest format and it doesn't accept many of the formats that GLB accepts as well. But depending on your use case, you might need an OBJ. So let me know if you'd want a full-blown video on that as well, and I will create it. Until then, I really hope that this video helped you understand how you can export different types of geometry in these various formats and hopefully avoid most of the issues that you might get. If you want this procedural arrow generator or maybe the procedural bridge generator, you can check out my tutorials on this channel or buy them off of my Patreon with the links given in the description. Until my next few videos come out, thank you so much for watching. Keep creating and don't forget to stay creative.